Welcome to the story of the Elves and the Shoemaker, a magical tale in a little workshop. In a poor yet cozy little shoemaker's shop, there lived a kind and humble cobbler. Just when it seemed that all hope had vanished, a miracle happened at midnight. Tiny, mysterious hands appeared and changed his life forever. Who were the ones that helped the shoemaker overcome hardships and find prosperity? Let's step into the enchanting fairy tale, The Elves and the Shoemaker. Long ago, in a quiet little town, there lived a kind-hearted shoemaker. He was no stranger to hard work, and his hands were worn from years of stitching, cutting, and shaping leather. Yet, despite his diligence, fortune seemed to turn its back on him. His trade declined, customers became fewer, and his savings dwindled away until all he had left was a single piece of leather, barely enough to craft one last pair of shoes. That evening, after carefully measuring and cutting the leather, the shoemaker set it neatly on his workbench. His plan was to sew it into shoes the next morning when his mind and hands were fresh. Tired but comforted by the thought of finishing one last job, he went to bed early. Within minutes, his steady breathing filled the room as he drifted into sleep. When dawn broke, the shoemaker rubbed his eyes and walked to his workbench. To his astonishment, instead of the cut leather pieces, there sat a perfectly finished pair of shoes. He lifted them up with trembling hands, his eyes wide with disbelief. The stitches were flawless, the leather smooth, and the craftsmanship beyond anything he could have achieved himself. It was the work of a master. That very day, a customer came into the shop. The moment he laid eyes on the shoes, his face lit up with admiration. He paid a price far higher than the shoemaker dared to ask, delighted to own such fine work. With the money, the shoemaker bought enough leather for 2 pairs of shoes. That night, once again, he measured and cut the leather, leaving it on the table before going to bed. And just as before, when morning came, the shoes were waiting for him. 2 pairs this time, each as exquisite as the first. Soon customers were lining up, offering generous payments for the beautiful footwear. With every sale, the shoemaker was able to buy more leather. 4 pairs, then 8, then more. His shop began to thrive. In time, the shoemaker's luck changed entirely. From poverty, he rose to comfort, and then to prosperity. He and his wife no longer worried about daily bread. Yet, amidst their new fortune, they remained humble, remembering how their blessings had begun, with a mystery. One cold December evening, as Christmas approached, the shoemaker sat with his wife by the fireplace. "I cannot rest until I know who has been helping us," he said. His wife nodded in agreement. "Tonight," she whispered, "we shall keep watch." So they blew out the lamp, lit only a small candle, and hid quietly behind a curtain of clothes near the corner of the room. Midnight struck. The air was still. Then the door creaked softly, and 2 tiny figures slipped inside. How astonishing it was when the shoemaker and his wife saw the 2 tiny little men, no taller than a toy, dressed in thin, worn-out clothes. They hurried to the workbench, pulled the leather pieces close and set to work. Their tiny fingers flew, snipping, stitching, pulling thread through leather with speed and precision. The couple watched in awe as the shoes took shape before their very eyes. When the last stitch was tied, the elves placed the shoes neatly on the table, nodded at their handiwork, and with a nimble leap, disappeared into the night. The next morning, the shoemaker's wife was the first to speak. "Poor little men," she said softly. "They have been so kind to us, and yet they wear such thin clothes in the freezing winter. We must show our gratitude." She decided to sew each elf a shirt, a warm coat, a vest, and trousers. She knitted tiny socks with loving care, while her husband promised to make them each a pair of shoes. By evening, their gifts were ready. They laid them on the workbench where the leather usually rested, and once again hid in the corner to watch. At midnight, the elves skipped into the workshop as usual, but instead of leather, they found the neat stack of clothing and shoes waiting for them. Their eyes widened in surprise, and then their faces lit up with joy. In no time, they dressed themselves: shirts, coats, trousers, vests, socks, and shoes. They smoothed the fabric with their tiny hands, admiring how fine they looked. They looked so fine that they danced around the room, singing happily. "Now we're dressed from head to toe. No one will call us cobblers anymore." Overcome with delight, the elves sang and danced around the workshop. They leapt onto chairs and tables, twirled and tapped their feet, their laughter ringing through the night. Then, hand in hand, they skipped out the door and vanished into the snowy darkness. That was the last time the shoemaker ever saw them. From that night on, the little shoemaker's helpers never returned. But the shoemaker and his wife no longer needed their aid, and he and his wife lived happily and thankfully all their days. Their shop flourished, their home was warm, and their lives were filled with comfort. And always in their hearts, they carried the memory of the two tiny friends who had once stitched hope into their lives. And from then on, the shoemaker lived in happiness and abundance, always grateful to the little elves who had quietly helped him. This tale reminds us that kindness and sharing, no matter how small, can create miracles and change an entire life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons below. And remember to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next stories. Thank you so much, everyone.